Video 21, Part 16b of 25, Inputs to the Plan Resource Management Process. The purpose of this video is to develop a WBS to present the inputs to the Plan Resource Management Process. The Plan Resource Management Process is the first process in the Project Resource Management knowledge area and is related to the Planning Process group. Please click the like button. Subscribe to my channel and share with others. Thank you. How important is the input of project charter to the Plan Resource Management Process? The input of the project charter to the Plan Resource Management Process is fundamentally critical. It is not just an optional input, it is the primary source of authority and high-level constraints that shape the entire resource management strategy. If you consider the project charter as the foundation and boundary for the resource plan management process, you'll have the foundation, as it provides the basic information, such as objectives, milestones, and budget, upon which the detailed resource plan is built. And you'll have the boundary, as it defines the limits, especially the financial budget, within which the resource plan should be developed. Here is how the specific elements of the project charter feed into creating the resource management plan. 1. Project purpose, objectives, and success criteria from project charter defines the skills and expertise needed to achieve those objectives in the resource management plan. 2. High-level requirements from project charter informs the type and quantity of resources, such as specific tech for a tech requirement, in the resource management plan. 3. Summary milestone schedule from project charter informs the timing and duration of resource needs in the resource management plan. For example, the development phase must be complete by Q3, so developers are needed in Q2. 4. The pre-assigned financial resources in the project charter define the absolute financial constraint for all resource costs in the resource management plan. This is undoubtedly the most significant constraint. The project budget described in the charter directly limits the available financial resources. Firstly, for human resources, due to salaries, overtime, bonuses, and training costs. Next, for material resources, due to equipment, software licenses, and raw materials. And finally, for external resources, due to consulting fees and vendor contracts. 5. Key stakeholder list from project charter identifies who must be consulted, informed, or who will provide resources in the resource management plan. For example, a key stakeholder might have specific team members they want assigned to the project or may need to be consulted on resource selection. 6. Assigned project manager and authority level from project charter grants the authority to create the plan and request resources in the resource management plan. This authority is essential for the plan resource management process because the project manager needs the right to ask for resources. Without the project charter, the project manager has no formal standing to request team members, equipment, or budget from functional managers or other stakeholders. 7. Source of high-level risks. The project charter often identifies high-level initial risks. These risks directly influence the resource management strategy. For example, if the project charter identifies the risk of possible shortage of qualified data scientists in the market, the resource management plan should include strategies to mitigate this risk, such as initiating recruitment early, planning for training existing staff, or budgeting for higher-cost hires. How can a poor project charter analysis harm the plan resource management process? A poor project charter analysis doesn't just harm the plan resource management process. It sets it up for failure from the very beginning. The project charter is the foundation, and a weak foundation causes cracks throughout the entire project structure. Here's how a poor analysis of the project charter specifically harms the plan resource management process. 1. Inaccurate or incomplete resource identification. The harm here is that a superficial reading of the project charter's high-level requirements and objectives can lead to completely missing the mark on what resources are actually needed. As a result, critical skill gaps emerge mid-project, causing delays, budget overruns, and rework as you scramble to find and onboard the correct resources. 2. Unrealistic budgeting and cost overruns. The harm here is that, because the pre-approved budget in the charter is a key constraint, a poor analysis fails to reconcile this financial boundary with the actual cost of the required resources. As a result, the resource plan is fundamentally unexecutable. The project immediately goes over budget, requiring emergency requests for additional funding, which may be denied, or forcing a reduction in resource quantity that compromises the project's scope or quality. 3. Unachievable scheduling and resource conflicts. The harm here is that, because the summary milestone schedule in the charter dictates when resources are needed, a poor analysis creates a resource plan that is impossible to fulfill within the given timeframe. For example, the charter mandates a go-live date in 9 months. A poor analysis doesn't account for the lead time to hire security-cleared personnel or the procurement time for specialized hardware that has a 6-month delivery window. As a result, the project schedule is built on a fantasy. Critical resources aren't available when needed, creating bottlenecks, idle time for other team members, and missed milestones. 4. Underestimating project complexity and risks. The harm is that a poor analysis overlooks the high-level risks stated in the charter, failing to incorporate mitigation strategies into the resource plan. For example, the charter notes a risk: potential union strike affecting delivery partners. A poor analysis ignores this and plans for a single external vendor. As a result, when the risk materializes, there is no contingency plan. The project grinds to a halt because there are no backup vendors identified, and no budget allocated for premium resources to recover lost time. 5. Stakeholder conflict and low team morale. The harm is that, because the key stakeholder list in the charter identifies who has a vested interest in the project's resources, a poor analysis fails to identify these stakeholders and their influence. For example, a powerful functional manager, which is a key stakeholder, is not consulted during resource planning. The project manager directly assigns their top-performing employee to the project full-time without negotiation. As a result, the functional manager feels bypassed and withdraws support. They may later recall the employee, causing disruption. This creates conflict, political battles, and damages the project's credibility. Team members pulled into this conflict suffer from low morale and uncertainty. 6. Lack of authority and inability to secure resources. The harm here is that, because the charter grants the project manager their authority, a poor analysis fails to understand the limits of this authority, leading to an unenforceable resource plan. For example, the charter is vague on the project manager's authority to select team members. The project manager creates a plan requiring specific experts, but functional managers refuse to provide them, arguing their operational work is more important. As a result, the project manager cannot secure the planned resources. The project is staffed with whoever is available, not who is needed, leading to skill gaps, longer task durations, and lower quality output. In conclusion, the plan resource management process transforms the project charter's high-level directives into a concrete action plan for people and equipment. If the understanding of those directives is flawed, the entire people management strategy for the project will be built on a bed of lies and misconceptions, guaranteeing severe problems down the line. A thorough charter analysis is the essential first step to creating a realistic, actionable, and successful resource management plan. As a final message, without the project charter, the plan resource management process would be based on guesswork and assumptions, lacking the formal authority and constraints necessary for effective planning. It would be difficult to get buy-in from functional managers and almost impossible to create a realistic and actionable resource management plan. Therefore, the project charter is not just important, it is essential. How important is the input of project management plan to the plan resource management process? The contribution of the project management plan is extremely important and fundamental to the resource management planning process, as it is the main source of constraints, requirements, and context within which resource management must be designed. Here's a breakdown of why it's so important, detailing which specific components of the plan are key inputs and how they influence the resource management plan. 1. Quality management plan. This plan is important because the required quality standards will directly influence the resources you need. You may need highly skilled specialists, specific tools, or certified personnel to meet quality objectives. A plan for a commercial-grade product versus a medical or aerospace-grade product requires vastly different resource skill levels and oversight. 2. Scope baseline, such as Project Scope Statement, WBS, and WBS Dictionary. This baseline is important because it's the foundation. The work breakdown structure and the project deliverables detailed in the scope statement define the actual work that needs to be done. You plan your resources, both team and physical, based on the activities in the WBS. 3. Schedule baseline. This baseline is important because it indicates when work, and therefore resources, are needed. It's impossible to create a resource calendar or plan resource acquisition without knowing the project's timelines, milestones, and critical paths. It helps identify potential resource bottlenecks, where multiple activities require the same specialist at the same time. 4. Cost baseline. This baseline is important because resource management is arguably the largest cost component of most projects. The cost baseline imposes a financial constraint. It determines whether you can hire senior specialists, use expensive equipment, or provide extensive training. You must plan your resources within the approved budget. 5. Risk register. This is important because project risks often have resource implications. For example, a risk like potential unavailability of a key developer directly leads to a resource strategy, such as identifying a backup resource or cross-training another team member. The resource management plan should include contingencies for resource-related risks. 6. Change management plan. This plan is important because it defines how changes will be handled. Since scope changes almost always require additional or different resources, the resource management plan must be adaptable. The change management process ensures that any change impacting resources is formally assessed and approved. 7. Stakeholder engagement plan. This plan is important because it identifies key stakeholders, their expectations, and their influence. Some stakeholders may need to be actively managed as part of the project team or may control critical resources. Understanding stakeholder dynamics is crucial for planning communication, authority, and influence within the team. How can a poor project management plan analysis harm the plan resource management process? A poor analysis of the project management plan doesn't just harm the plan resource management process. It fundamentally undermines it, leading to a cascade of failures throughout the project. Here's how a poor analysis of key project management plan components causes direct harm. 1. Poor analysis of the scope baseline. If you don't properly analyze the work breakdown structure, you will miss work packages or misunderstand the effort required. This can result in the following problems. First, understaffing. Not identifying all tasks means you won't request enough team members. Second, incorrect skill sets. Misunderstanding the complexity of a task means you might assign a junior developer to a task that requires a senior architect, or a generalist to a specialized role. Third, lack of physical resources. You might forget to acquire critical equipment, software licenses, or specialized materials needed for specific scope items. 2. Poor analysis of the schedule baseline. Inefficient and unsustainable resource loading and scheduling can result in, first, resource overallocation. Without understanding the critical path and task dependencies, you might unknowingly schedule the same key person on multiple tasks simultaneously, creating an impossible workload and becoming a single point of failure. Second, costly idle time. Conversely, resources might be procured and hired too early because their start date wasn't tied to a precise predecessor task, leading to them sitting idle and burning through the budget. Third, unrealistic timelines. The resource plan might assume a normal 40-hour workweek, but a compressed project schedule analyzed too late reveals the need for massive overtime or a larger team, which is now impossible to acquire in time. 3. Poor analysis of the cost baseline or budget. Because the resource plan is a major cost driver, ignoring budget constraints can result in, first, planning for gold-plated resources. You may plan for a team of high-level, expensive consultants when the budget only allows for a mix of mid-level and junior staff. Second, lack of contingency budget. You fail to include a management reserve for unforeseen resource needs, such as hiring a replacement or paying for emergency training. Third, plan rejection. The resulting resource management plan, with its high costs, will likely be rejected by the project sponsor or steering committee, forcing a costly and demoralizing replanning effort. 4. Poor analysis of the risk register. Insufficient risk register analysis can result in a fragile and non-resilient plan. A resource plan that ignores risks is naive and can result in the following problems. First, lack of mitigation strategies. The key team member may resign. Risk requires a mitigation plan, such as cross-training or identifying a backup candidate. Without analyzing this risk, the plan lacks countermeasures. Second, single points of failure. The plan may centralize critical knowledge in one person without any knowledge transfer or succession strategy, putting the entire project at risk if that person leaves. Third, unplanned costs. When a high-impact risk occurs, such as a specialized piece of equipment failure, the reactive cost of hiring a replacement at an additional cost can devastate the budget because it was not planned. 5. Poor analysis of the quality management plan. Because quality standards define the level of expertise required, resources without the necessary skills can result in, first, skills gaps. If the project requires formal testing and validation, such as ISO standards, but you allocate resources to a team with experience only in quick, informal projects, quality goals will not be met and rework will be extensive. Second, missing roles. You may fail to include critical quality-focused roles, such as a quality assurance engineer, inspector, or auditor, as required by the quality plan. 6. Poor analysis of the stakeholder engagement plan. A poor analysis of the stakeholder engagement plan can result in political struggles, ineffective leadership, and communication breakdowns due to the following problems. First, ignoring influential stakeholders. You might assign a junior team member to manage a relationship with a high-power, high-interest stakeholder who requires attention from the project sponsor or senior project manager. Second, ineffective reporting. The communication requirements defined for key stakeholders, such as frequency, detail, and format, won't be reflected in the project team's defined reporting responsibilities, leading to miscommunication and dissatisfaction. In conclusion, the project management plan provides the rules of the game and the playing field for the plan resource management process as follows. First, the project management plan provides context and constraints. You are not planning resources in isolation. You are planning within the specific scope, time, cost, quality, and risk limits defined in the overall plan. Second, the project management plan ensures integration, and the resource management plan it produces will integrate seamlessly with other subsidiary plans. Third, the project management plan enables realistic planning by basing resource plans on approved baselines. On the other hand, an inadequate analysis of the project management plan ensures that the plan resource management process is an exercise in fiction, not planning. This creates a plan that is unrealistic, unfeasible, unstable, and ultimately doomed to failure, taking the entire project down with it. As a final message, the contribution of the project management plan is not only important, it is essential and non-negotiable. Without it, the project resource management process would be based on assumptions and guesswork, leading to a resource plan misaligned with the project's objectives, constraints, and realities, ultimately compromising project success. How important is the input of project documents to the plan resource management process? Project documents are crucial to the plan resource management process as they provide the essential, specific data and context needed to create a realistic, actionable, and effective resource management plan. Project documents provides exactly the information you need to understand the work they have to do, the timeline they have to do it in, and the constraints they are working under so you can know who you need, when you need them, and what they will do. Here's a breakdown. Project documents are so important and which specific documents are key. 1. Provides the foundation of work. The primary source for understanding the work that needs resources is the project scope baseline, specifically the WBS and WBS dictionary. The WBS breaks down the project into manageable pieces of work, work packages, and each of these requires resources. Without the WBS, resource planning would be a guess. 2. Informs timing and dependencies. The project schedule shows when activities will occur. This is vital for planning when specific resources, especially team members with specialized skills, are needed, allowing for accurate forecasting and avoiding resource conflicts or idle time. 3. Defines necessary skills and knowledge. The requirements documentation and activity attributes often detail the specific skills, knowledge, and experience needed to complete a piece of work. This directly informs the type of resources you need to acquire. 4. Identifies constraints and assumptions. Documents like the assumption log and risk register are crucial, like the examples shown now. First, assumption log. You might be planning based on an assumption that a senior engineer will be available in Q3. This assumption must be validated and managed. Second, risk register. A risk like potential unavailability of key subject matter experts directly impacts your resource acquisition and backup plans, such as cross-training and hiring a consultant. 5. Provides historical context. If available, lessons learned register from previous projects can provide invaluable insight into what resource strategies worked well. such as co-located teams improved communication, or what caused problems, such as team was overallocated by 20%, leading to burnout. How can a poor project documents analysis harm the plan resource management process? A poor analysis of project documents during the plan resource management process isn't just a minor oversight. It fundamentally undermines the entire effort, leading to a plan that is built on flawed assumptions and incomplete information. This poor analysis directly translates into the following significant and tangible damage to the project. 1. Inaccurate resource identification and acquisition. The harm is to get the wrong people, the wrong equipment, or the wrong quantity, and it happens as follows. First, poor WBS, schedule analysis. Without a detailed analysis of the work breakdown structure and project schedule, you might miss specific work packages or underestimate the complexity of activities. This leads to identifying generic roles, such as developer, instead of specific skill sets, such as Python developer with API integration experience. Second, poor requirements analysis. Ignoring the requirements documentation may mean you miss a critical certification, security clearance, or industry-specific experience needed to meet quality or compliance standards. You acquire a resource that is fundamentally incapable of doing the work. 2. Unrealistic scheduling and severe bottlenecks. The harm is that the project timeline becomes unachievable due to resource constraints, leading to missed deadlines. It happens as a poor schedule analysis. Failing to analyze the project schedule's activity sequencing means you won't see that 5 high-intensity tasks requiring the same specialist are all scheduled to start in the same week. This creates an impossible bottleneck, where that one person is expected to be in 5 places at once. 3. Financial impacts and budget overruns. The harm is that the project runs out of money prematurely. It happens as follows. First, poor cost estimates analysis. If you don't align your resource plan with the project's cost estimates and budget, you might plan for resources you simply cannot afford, such as hiring senior consultants when the budget only allows for junior staff. Second, poor risk register analysis. Missing a risk about a potential increase in material costs or the premium cost of contracting scarce specialists means your resource budget has no contingency. When the risk materializes, it blows the budget. 4. Increased team conflict and low morale. The harm is that the team becomes frustrated, disengaged, and unproductive. It happens as follows. First, poor assumption log analysis. Proceeding with the assumption that resources will be available 100% of their time, without validating it leads to overallocation. Team members are assigned to multiple projects simultaneously, leading to burnout, context switching, and missed deadlines. Second, poor stakeholder register analysis. Not identifying key influencers, like functional managers who control resource assignments, leads to political battles and an inability to secure the promised resources. The team is constantly waiting for people who never arrive. 5. Higher exposure to risk and lack of contingency. The harm is that the project is unprepared for inevitable resource-related issues, leading to crisis management. It happens as a poor risk register analysis. This is perhaps the most dangerous failure. Ignoring documented risks like key supplier may go out of business or sole SME may retire means you have no backup plan, no cross-training strategy, and no alternative vendors identified. When the risk occurs, work grinds to a complete halt. 6. Ineffective team structure and communication. The harm is that the team is structured in a way that hinders rather than helps progress. It happens as follows. First, poor lessons learned analysis. Repeating the same mistakes from past projects, such as creating a geographically dispersed team without a communication plan. Because you failed to review what previously caused communication breakdowns. Second, poor stakeholder analysis. Not understanding the communication needs and influence of different stakeholders leads to a communication plan that misses key audiences, causing misunderstandings and rework. In conclusion, to say that project documents are important is an understatement. They are fundamental. The plan resource management process synthesizes information from all other planning areas, such scope, schedule, cost, risk, and others, to create a cohesive plan for your project team and physical resources. The key project documents and their specific inputs are the following. First, the project schedule shows the timing of activities, which determines when specific resources are needed. It is essential for creating resource histograms and managing resource load. Second, requirements documentation often specifies the skills, experience, or certifications needed to meet specific technical or quality requirements. Third, risk register identifies risks related to resource availability, funding, sourcing, and more. The resource management plan must include strategies to mitigate these risks, such as contingency plans and backup resources. Fourth, assumption log documents assumptions about resource availability, cost, skills, and physical resource lead times. These assumptions form the basis of the plan and must be tracked. Fifth, activity attributes provides detailed information about activities that help identify the necessary resource types and skills. Sixth, cost estimates is important because the budget for resources, both human and material, is a major constraint. You cannot plan for resources you cannot afford. Seventh, stakeholder register identifies stakeholders who may influence resource planning, such as functional managers who supply team members, vendors, and unions, or who must be consulted on resource decisions. Eighth, lessons learned register provides historical information on effective resource management strategies, team structures, and issues encountered on past projects. On the other hand, poor project document analysis doesn't just create a bad piece of paper, the resource management plan. It creates a strategic vulnerability that cascades through every aspect of the project, people, schedule, budget, and risk, making project failure a likely outcome. The resource management plan becomes a fantasy document, completely disconnected from the reality of the work that needs to be done. As a final message, without the specific, detailed input from these project documents, the resource management plan would be generic, theoretical, and ultimately ineffective, leading to project delays, cost overruns, and failure to meet objectives. The project documents provide the concrete data that transforms the planning process from guesswork into informed, strategic decision-making. How important is the input of enterprise environmental factors to the plan resource management process? The input of enterprise environmental factors is critically important and fundamental to the plan resource management process because you can't plan who you need, how you'll manage them, or what they'll do without first understanding the environment they operate in. Enterprise environmental factors set the boundaries, constraints, and opportunities for your resource plan. You are not planning in a vacuum, you are planning within a specific organizational ecosystem. Ignoring enterprise environmental factors leads to an idealized, theoretical resource management plan that is doomed to fail. Enterprise environmental factors ground your plan in reality. The type of organization you are in, such as functional, matrix, or projectized, directly dictates your authority over resources and your team's reporting structure, and this influence happens as follows. Here's a breakdown of why enterprise environmental factors are so crucial and how they specifically influence the process. 1. Organizational culture and structure. This influence happens as follows. First, existing HR policies. Rules for hiring, firing, employee reviews, and disciplinary actions dictate how you can manage your team. Second, established processes and templates. The organization may have standard role descriptions, reporting formats, org charts, and team directories that you must use, saving time and ensuring consistency. Third, organizational structure, such as functional, matrix, or projectized. This is perhaps the biggest influence. In first place, it determines your authority. Do you directly manage your team members, or are they loaned from functional managers? Next, it determines the reporting lines. Who does the team report to? And finally, it determines the resource availability. How easy or difficult is it to acquire resources? 2. Existing resources and capabilities. First, existing human resources. What are the competencies, skills, and knowledge of people already within the organization? What are their current workloads and availability? You must plan with the resources you have or can realistically get. Second, physical resource availability. What equipment, facilities, and materials are already available? It is not possible to use a specialized lab if the company doesn't have one. 3. Marketplace conditions. First, labor market. What skills are available externally? What are the going rates for contractors or new hires? This influences decisions to make or buy, such as train internally versus hire externally. Second, economic factors. Is the company in a growth phase, when it's easier to hire new employees, or in a budget-cutting phase, when it needs to use only existing resources? 4. Geographic distribution. First, where are your team members and facilities located? Are they co-located, distributed across a country, or spread around the world? This directly shapes your plan for communication, such as tools and time zones, and your team development approach, such as how you will build a cohesive virtual team. 5. Information technology and software. First, what project management information system tools are available? Does the company use specific software for scheduling, time tracking, and collaboration, such as Jira, MS Project, or Asana? Your resource management plan must integrate with these systems. How can a poor enterprise environmental factors analysis harm the plan resource management process? A poor or incomplete analysis of enterprise environmental factors is a critical failure that directly leads to a flawed and often unimplementable resource management plan. Here's how a poor enterprise environmental factors analysis specifically harms the plan resource management process. 1. Unrealistic resource acquisition and allocation. The harm is planning for resources you cannot obtain. For example, a plan is created requiring 5 senior data scientists based on the project's technical needs, but the enterprise environmental factors analysis failed to detect a company-wide hiring freeze and that all existing senior data scientists are already allocated to other strategic projects. The plan fails from the start. 2. Clash with organizational culture. The harm is that the team management approach is rejected or fails to motivate the team. For example, an agile, collaborative, and flat team structure is planned with a high degree of autonomy. However, the analysis of the enterprise environmental factors fails to detect that the organization is deeply hierarchical and command and control. Functional managers reject the plan, and team members used to top-down direction are confused and disengaged. 3. Violation of policies and legal requirements. The harm here is that the plan is non-compliant, creating legal, financial, and reputational risk. For example, A plan is created to use independent contractors for a significant portion of the work to save costs. However, analysis of HR policies and local labor laws fails to define the strict criteria for a contractor versus a full-time employee. The plan is discarded after legal review, causing significant delays and potential penalties. 4. Ineffective communication and collaboration. The harm is that the team fails to gel, leading to misunderstandings, delays, and low morale. For example, a plan is created for daily meetings at 9 a.m. for the assigned team. However, the enterprise environmental factors geographic distribution analysis fails to detect that half of the critical team members are in a time zone 12 hours ahead. The plan imposes an unreasonable 9 p.m. meeting time on them, leading to burnout and resentment. 5. Budget overruns and inflated costs. The harm is that the resource budget is completely inaccurate. For example, the budget determines a junior developer's time at $50 per hour. However, the analysis the marketplace condition enterprise environmental factors fails to detect that a recent tech boom has driven the market rate for that skill set to $80 per hour. The project is forced to either pay the higher rate, blowing the budget, or settle for a less qualified resource, increasing risk. 6. Inadequate tools and processes. The harm here is that the plan is created to use tools the organization doesn't support, leading to inefficiency and friction. For example, the resource plan is built around using Jira for task tracking and time management. However, the analysis of the enterprise environmental factors fails to detect that the company has an enterprise-wide license for and mandates the use of Microsoft Azure DevOps. So, the team now has to use two systems or a new plan must be created, wasting time and effort. 7. Unmanageable stakeholder relationships. The harm here is to create a governance model that ignores key influencers. For example, a RACI chart is created where project sponsors have final approval. However, the analysis of the enterprise environmental factors of the organizational political landscape fails to detect the as required buy-in from a specific, powerful functional manager who has veto power over any resource assigned from their department. And the approval process stalls indefinitely. 8. Failed team development and retention. The harm here is not being able to build or keep an effective team. For example, a plan includes intense periods of overtime. However, the analysis of the enterprise environmental factors fails to detect that the company has a strong work-life balance culture and that previous projects failed due to team burnout. Top talent refuses to join your project, and those who do quickly leave. In conclusion, saying that enterprise environmental factors are important is an understatement. They are the fundamental context. A project manager who fails to adequately consider enterprise environmental factors during the resource management planning process will create a plan that is, first, a theoretical plan. The resource plan looks good on paper but is useless in practice because it ignores the real-world environment. It is also unrealistic as it assumes resources are available when they are not. Second, ineffective as it proposes management styles that conflict with the organizational culture. Third, unimplementable as it requires authority the project manager does not possess or violates company policy. As a final message, enterprise environmental factors provide the rules of the game for resource management. It is not just an optional input. It is the essential context within which all resource planning decisions are made. A successful project manager does not fight against these factors, but learns to navigate and leverage them to create a robust and actionable resource management plan. How important is the input of organizational process assets to the plan resource management process? The input of organizational process assets is critically important and fundamentally indispensable to the plan resource management process. It is the primary mechanism for leveraging an organization's historical knowledge, established practices, and cultural norms to create a more effective, efficient, and realistic resource management plan. Without organizational process assets, every project manager would have to start from a blank slate, inventing their own ways of managing people and teams. Organizational process assets provide the templates, lessons, and guidelines that prevent this wasteful reinvention. Here we have specific organizational process assets used in plan resource management. In the case of processes and procedures, we have the following examples. First, standardized templates for a team charter or RACI matrix. Second, guidelines for staffing, termination, and performance reviews. Third, safety policies and compliance standards. In the case of corporate knowledge base, we have the following examples. First, historical records from similar projects, such as team size, composition, and hours spent. Second, lessons learned repositories, such as what motivated teams and what caused conflict. Third, configuration management knowledge base, such as who has expertise on certain systems. Fourth, financial data on labor rates and overhead costs for accurate budgeting. Here's a breakdown of why organizational process assets are so crucial, with specific examples. 1. They provide templates and standardized frameworks. Organizational process assets save immense time and ensure consistency across projects. For example, instead of creating a RACI chart from scratch, a project manager can pull a standardized RACI matrix template from the organizational knowledge base. They might also have access to predefined role descriptions, competency frameworks, and team charter templates. 2. They offer historical data and lessons learned. This is perhaps the most valuable aspect. Past projects provide a treasure trove of information on what worked and what didn't. For example, historical records can show that a specific type of task consistently required 20% more effort than initially planned. This allows the current project manager to build more accurate estimates. Lessons learned from a past project might warn that using a large, co-located team for a creative task led to communication overhead and design by committee, suggesting a smaller, focused team is better. 3. They define established policies, procedures, and culture. The way we do things here is a key organizational process assets that directly shapes the resource management plan. We will show now some examples to illustrate this matter. First, procurement policies. Rules about hiring contractors or vendors will dictate how the plan addresses acquiring team members. Second, safety and security policies. These dictate specific training or compliance requirements for resources. Third, organizational culture. Is the culture hierarchical or flat, collaborative or siloed? This will influence the choice of a project organization chart, such as hierarchical versus matrix versus flat. Fourth, performance review procedures. How team performance is measured and assessed is often a corporate standard. 4. They provide a repository of historical information. This goes beyond lessons learned to include actual data. For example, a database of previous project schedules, especially for similar projects, allows a manager to see the composition of past teams, such as how many developers, testers, designers were needed and for how long. This is invaluable for creating accurate resource calendars and estimating effort. How can a poor organizational process assets analysis harm the plan resource management process? Of course, a poor analysis of organizational process assets doesn't just represent a missed opportunity, it actively introduces significant risk and can lead to the direct failure of the plan resource management process and, by extension, the project itself. Here's how a poor organizational process assets analysis can specifically harm the plan resource management process. 1. Inaccurate estimating and unrealistic resourcing. Poor analysis fails to leverage the most reliable data an organization has about its own history. The harm is caused because without historical data on how long similar tasks took, what team size was needed, or what skills were required, estimates become guesswork, which can result in, first, underestimating, leading to an understaffed team, burnout, missed deadlines, and low quality. Second, overestimating, leading to a bloated budget, inefficient use of resources, and reduced profitability. Third, incorrect skill mapping. The team might have the wrong mix of skills, such as too many junior developers or not enough architects, causing bottlenecks. 2. Repeating past mistakes and ignoring known risks. The Lessons Learned repository is an organizational process asset specifically designed to prevent the repetition of errors. A poor analysis ignores this critical knowledge. The harm caused may be that the project is doomed to repeat avoidable failures, as follows. First, team conflict. Past reports might show that certain personality types or specific teams clash. Ignoring this leads to preventable team dysfunction. Second, productivity killers. Previous projects may have identified that a specific tool or process was inefficient. Reusing that same tool will hamper the new team's productivity. Third, unmanaged risks. Known resource-related risks, such as a specific skill is scarce in the organization, go unaddressed in the plan. 3. Creating a plan that clashes with organizational culture. Organizational process assets embody the company's culture and standards. A poor analysis creates a plan that is theoretically sound but practically impossible to implement. The harm caused may be that the resource management plan faces resistance and fails during execution, as follows. First, authority issues. If the organization has a rigid, hierarchical culture, proposing a flat, empowered team structure will cause confusion and conflict with functional managers. Second, compliance failures. The plan might violate established security, safety, or HR policies, leading to delays, rework, or legal issues. Third, stakeholder rejection. Key stakeholders may dismiss a plan that doesn't align with the way things are done here. 4. Inefficient and inconsistent processes. Standardized templates and procedures ensure efficiency and quality across projects. A poor analysis forces the project manager to start from scratch. The harm caused can be wasted time and inconsistent outcomes, as follows. First, reinventing the wheel. The project manager spends days creating ARACI chart, training plan, or team charter from scratch instead of adapting an existing, proven template. Second, lack of standards. Without using standardized role descriptions, two projects might have the same job title with completely different responsibilities, causing confusion and misassignment of resources. 5. Failure to identify and acquire the right resources. The organization's existing human resources, such as their skills, availability, and prior experience, are a key organizational process assets. The harm caused is that the plan is built for a perfect team that doesn't exist, as follows. First, unavailable resources. The plan might call for 10 senior engineers, but a check of the organizational resource calendars would have shown that only 5 are available. Second, unknown capabilities. The project manager might hire expensive external consultants for a skill that already exists in another department because they failed to analyze the internal skills inventory. 6. Demotivating the project team. A plan built without considering past team feedback and motivational strategies is a plan that ignores the human element. The harm caused is low team morale and poor performance, as follows. First, ineffective rewards. The reward system outlined in the plan, such as individual bonuses, might conflict with what historical lessons show actually motivates teams, such as team-based recognition and professional development opportunities. Second, ignoring feedback. If past teams reported that excessive reporting killed morale, and the new plan introduces even more reports, the team will be demotivated from the start. In conclusion, a poor organizational process assets analysis doesn't just result in a bad document. It creates a resource management plan that is built on a foundation of assumptions rather than evidence. This flawed plan then cascades into every aspect of project execution, as follows. First, cost and schedule are harmed by inaccurate estimates. Second, team performance suffers due to avoidable conflict, lack of motivation, and skill mismatches. Third, stakeholder confidence is eroded due to repeated past mistakes and clashes with culture. Fourth, project outcome is jeopardized, as the project team is set up to fail from the very beginning. In essence, ignoring OPAs is ignoring the organization's collective wisdom. It forces the project manager and the team to learn every lesson the hard way, dramatically increasing the risk of project failure. As a final message, organizational process assets are not just another input, they are the foundation of organizational learning applied to project management. They transform the plan resource management process from an exercise of theoretical guesswork into a practice of informed, evidence-based planning. By leveraging organizational process assets, a project manager dramatically increases the chances of developing a realistic, practical, and effective plan for guiding, managing, and leading the project team. This video is finished, but we will have in the next videos. 1. Creation of WBS for different projects using WBS Schedule Pro. 2. Examples of project plans using MS Project. And many more videos. Don't forget to give a thumbs up if you liked this video and want us to continue with new topics. Subscribe to the channel. All content is free. You can also comment suggesting topics you would like to see on this channel. Thank you.